Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Had God-Tier Nature Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Name, Izuku Midoriya. Age, 17. Appearance, forest green hair and emerald eyes. Quirk, nature's gift, SS. Quirk description. The quirk allows control over the elements of nature: fire, water, earth, wind, light, darkness, electricity, and metal, and it can influence weather. It allows communication with animals, summoning them, gaining their traits and abilities, and transforming into them. It grants accelerated healing and regeneration and the ability to draw energy from light. The quirk cannot be stolen and provides deep knowledge of the world, including heightened intelligence and emotional perception. Drawbacks: animals are strongly drawn to the user. Healing others drains the user's energy. The quirk sometimes acts with a will of its own. Likes: friends, family, nature, animals, helping people, singing. Dislikes: bullies, pollution, littering, deforestation, animal cruelty. Kaken was bullying me again. I had taught myself first aid so my mom would not have to worry about me. Being quirkless, I felt I had to prove my worth, so I learned as much as I could: first aid, survival skills, coding, and mechanics. I also felt strangely connected to nature and animals, so I studied earth science and animal biology, which came surprisingly easily. 5 years ago, Izuku asked Kaken why he was doing this as he ran to the kid Kaken was beating up. Kaken told him to be quiet, called him useless, and insisted he could never be a hero because he was quirkless. Kaken and his lackeys activated their quirks and left Izuku beaten, bruised, and dirty. He went home alone and began learning to treat his own injuries. Present time, Izuku walked home thinking about what to cook for dinner. He usually prepared dinner before his mom came home so she could rest. She worked hard to provide for them. A week later, Izuku was walking home with his hero analysis book number 13, which Kaken had previously destroyed and thrown into the koi pond. Noticing a strange sound, he turned to see a strange green fluid seeping from a drain. The slime villain mocked him and attempted to suffocate him with its mass. A sudden gust of wind hit, and Izuku began to black out. He woke up to a sparrow pecking him, and 2 pigeons had managed to contain the villain in a large soda bottle. Izuku thanked the birds, and the birds seemed to nod and chirp back as they perched on his leg before flying off. Shaken, Izuku continued walking and accidentally bumped into a large, bulky man. Izuku stammered an apology to All Might and asked what he was doing here. All Might asked if Izuku had seen a green slime villain around the area. Izuku explained that the villain had attacked him and that he had found it confined in a bottle. He handed the bottle to All Might. Before All Might left, Izuku asked if he could be a hero without a quirk. Izuku was told he could not, which left him heartbroken. As Izuku walked home, an explosion came from nearby. He ran toward the scene and saw the slime monster holding Kaken hostage. Izuku's legs moved on their own. A gust of wind blew the flames out and separated Kaken from the slime villain, and then everything went black. Izuku later woke up surrounded by heroes. Izuku asked what had happened. The heroes scolded him about illegal quirk usage and how dangerous that had been. After hours of questioning and reprimands, they asked about his quirk. Izuku had been told he did not have one, and he stammered that he believed he was quirkless, though something similar had happened earlier that day. Death Arms suggested that Izuku might have an elemental or nature quirk that manifested late. I hesitated at my front door because the lights were off and my mother was not home yet. There was no note left on the door, which was strange. Instead of entering through the front, Izuku snuck around and peeked through a window. He found his mother on the floor, unconscious, and a man wearing a strange mask sitting on the couch. After a few moments of fear and thinking, Izuku decided to run away for safety. He left some items on the floor, entered through the window, grabbed the emergency bag his mother had prepared and some money, and then hurried to his room to gather his laptop, notebooks, and clothes. As he prepared to escape through his window, he knocked over a lamp. Hearing loud footsteps approaching his room, Izuku climbed out the window, grabbed his other bag, and ran as fast as he could. About 20 minutes later, Izuku slowed down and looked around. After 10 to 15 minutes of searching, he found an abandoned house and told himself it would be fine for now as he set his belongings down. Izuku needed a place that was spacious and private. He wanted to attend UA without being bothered or discovered, so after searching on his laptop he decided to set up a place in the forest next to UA. The next day, Izuku woke to a robin pecking him. He greeted the robin that had perched on his finger and felt as if it had answered him. He wondered whether his quirk allowed him to communicate with animals. The robin flew off after he offered it a piece of a granola bar from his backpack. He packed his things and stopped at a gas station for food and water. He took a train toward UA and walked into the forest to test his quirk. He called into the trees, and a few animals flew and ran to him. Izuku asked a squirrel that had climbed onto his head to lead him to a clearing. After 2 hours of testing, he had figured out most of his quirk. Animals could communicate with him and were drawn to his presence. He could influence aspects of nature. Using his ability, he fashioned a small house within a few hours and felt proud of his work. He visited nearby stores for supplies, spent hours decorating and building furniture, and then worked on getting lights, water, and electricity functioning. He managed to get the utilities working. Izuku watched the forest respond around his new home and felt a quiet satisfaction. He wondered whether Tokoyami, whose appearance and demeanor were bird-like, would be friendly toward him. Aizawa had been handed a difficult case, a murder scene where the victim was identified as Izuku Midoriya. On top of that, there was a missing child report for 9-year-old Izuku Midoriya. The boy was quirkless, had green hair and green eyes, and no known relatives. The person who had acted as a father figure was missing. 2 weeks later, Aizawa felt frustration building. He resented cases involving children and the harm they had to see. He pulled at his hair, muttering to himself about the impossibility of where a 9-year-old could have disappeared to. Hisashi approached from behind and asked what was wrong. Aizawa explained that he could not figure out the case. A mother had been murdered and the child had vanished with no relatives to turn to. Hisashi suggested checking with people the family had known, friends who might have information. Meanwhile, Izuku had been living in a small house in the woods for 2 weeks. He used his quirk to grow his own fruits and vegetables from seeds he had found. He went into town once or twice for supplies and explored the forest, discovering various animals. He encountered a wolf pack and a lioness with a cub. He did not know how they had come to be there, but he befriended them. They visited his home often, and he had given them names. He kept to a simple routine of tending crops, learning from the animals, and exploring. After a time skip of 2 years, Izuku grew restless. He had taken many online courses and absorbed as much knowledge as his quirk allowed, effectively educating himself in a wide range of subjects. To pass the time, he trained steadily, practicing martial arts, studying languages, learning codes and hacking techniques, and pushing his quirk's limits. He cleaned a local beach, salvaged parts to build gadgets, worked odd jobs to earn money for emergencies, and compiled detailed notes on the heroes of Japan in several notebooks which he hid in unusual places for safekeeping. Now 11 and eager for experience toward his goal of attending UA and becoming a hero, he decided to act as a vigilante. Because it was illegal to use a quirk in public without a license, he focused on hand-to-hand combat and gadgets. He crafted a suit with hidden pockets that was fire and water resistant, and he made smoke bombs, flash effects, throwing daggers, a voice changer mask, and various small tools. After a month of training and preparation, a night of patrols went well. Izuku intervened to stop 2 assaults and disrupt a drug dealer. He engaged the perpetrators in quick, non-lethal maneuvers, subdued them without causing lasting harm, and notified the authorities from an upgraded phone that could not easily be traced. During that patrol, he encountered Eraserhead on a rooftop. In a recalled encounter, Eraserhead activated his quirk and restrained the young vigilante with his capture weapon. Izuku used his voice changer to introduce himself as Evergreen and deployed a flash effect. While Eraserhead's vision was briefly obscured, Izuku used his quirk to change form and slipped away, leaving Eraserhead confused. Aizawa returned home more tired than usual after filing a report about the new vigilante and dealing with a difficult class. Hisashi asked what was wrong. Aizawa explained that his class remained challenging and that a new vigilante calling himself Evergreen had appeared. The boy looked very young, around 12, and Aizawa judged him to be a problematic presence. Izuku continued his solitary training and preparations, hiding his notebooks and maintaining his small home in the woods while he waited for the day he could take the next step toward becoming a licensed hero. It had been 2 years since Izuku Midoriya began operating as the Evergreen Vigilante. He was fairly well known by then, and more pro-heroes were searching for him. During his free time he often observed them through his animals and added notes to his hero analysis notebooks. Those notebooks contained drawings of costumes, hero names, real names, birthdays, quirks, strengths, weaknesses, fighting styles, secrets, and biggest fears. On a routine patrol, he felt as though someone was following him. Multiple pro-heroes had indeed tracked him down and moved to capture him. Edge Shot, Hawks, and Best Jeanist were among the group. Eraserhead interfered as they closed in, and Aizawa found himself puzzling over how Evergreen always managed to vanish after a flashbang or smoke bomb. The heroes shadowed Evergreen carefully and followed him to a forest near UA. Hawks took to the air to scout for traps, and the group discovered a fully furnished house with electricity and lights hidden among the trees. They returned at 4 in the morning to watch. Aizawa was shocked when a 13-year-old boy with forest green hair, emerald eyes, and freckles emerged from the house. Aizawa recognized him as the boy who had been reported missing years earlier. Aizawa whispered that the boy appeared to be Izuku Midoriya, who had been presumed dead. Edgeshot asked Aizawa if he was sure, and Aizawa confirmed his suspicion while keeping watch on the house. A bird landed near Izuku, chirped, and then flew away as Izuku went inside and returned wearing a hoodie. After 15 minutes, Aizawa signaled to the others, and they searched the house. Hawks flipped through a notebook and exclaimed in disbelief when he found detailed hero analyses. The heroes examined the notebook and realized it contained NTMT knowledge of their lives. Best Jeanist turned pages until he found a profile on himself and commented that it was terrifying to know someone knew so much about them. Aizawa agreed, and then a voice answered them. The vigilante had revealed himself. Aizawa ordered the vigilante to show himself and moved into a fighting stance. Izuku, aware that people in the forest were watching him, had used a wolf's hearing to confirm their presence. He slipped back into the house, then emerged and confronted the heroes. He asked what they wanted, but Best Jeanist pushed forward and restrained him while Eraserhead used his ability to suppress Izuku's quirk. With his quirk neutralized, the heroes bound him and took him to the police station, Hawks watching from above. At the station, Detective Naomasa Tsukachi prepared to question the captured boy. Tsukachi's quirk functioned as a lie detector. Tsukachi asked the vigilante his identity and reasons for being there. Izuku gave his alias as Evergreen and his real name as Izuku Midoriya. He confirmed his age as 13, said he lived in the forest, and admitted that he had been told he was quirkless. Tsukachi left the interrogation room to brief the heroes and explained that he would be able to tell if Izuku was lying. The heroes wondered how Izuku managed to disappear every time they tried to catch him, and Tsukachi suggested they ask Izuku directly. When the heroes returned to the interrogation room, they found Izuku sitting calmly and communicating with spiders. He used the small creatures as messengers. They could move unnoticed and pass along information. He relayed to the heroes that the spiders had informed him about illegal activity at several locations, and he had mentally noted those places before thanking them for the information. Best Jeanist asked how Izuku was able to communicate if quirk-suppressing cuffs were in place. Izuku lifted his hands to show the cuffs and explained that parts of his ability could not be turned off. Tsukachi noted that Izuku had said he was said to be quirkless, and Izuku clarified that his phrasing had been technically truthful. He had been described by others as quirkless, not that he truly had no quirk. Edgeshot then demanded an explanation for the notebooks. Tsukachi looked confused until Edgeshot explained that they had found numerous notebooks cataloging heroes' personal details. Izuku admitted that he had been analyzing heroes for a long time and that his animal friends told him much of what he recorded. He emphasized that spiders in particular made excellent spies because they were small, fast, and everywhere. He had hidden the notebooks to prevent villains from obtaining sensitive information. When asked directly about the nature of his quirk, Izuku only smiled and told them to guess. The heroes offered several possibilities, speculating that his ability might be a disappearing quirk, an animal-related quirk, an analysis-type quirk, or an intelligence-related quirk. They left the room weighing those possibilities and the implications of a 13-year-old vigilante who had survived in the forest, communicated through animals, and kept detailed records on the people who protected the city. Izuku smirked and told them no. Hawks looked confused and asked what his quirk was. Izuku looked down at his hands and admitted he did not know. Best Jeanist pressed him for clarification. Izuku explained that he did not know the full extent of his quirk. He reminded them of the sludge villain incident years ago. When his quirk first manifested, he had been a late bloomer. When he went home that day, he returned to find that his mother had been attacked and a faceless villain sitting in the living room. He slipped out through a window, grabbed his belongings, and ran. He had heard rumors that a powerful villain called All for One wanted him and his quirk, likely to steal it or to force him to join. The memory made him fidget. It was uncomfortable to talk about. He had been ignored for years when people thought he was quirkless. Inspector Tsukachi gathered the heroes outside and asked what they should do. He noted the boy was only a teenager and would need to be processed by the system. Perhaps the quirk doctors should examine him. Edgeshot agreed that they should take him to the quirk doctors. Hawks could not quite believe the #1 villain was interested in the boy, and Eraserhead observed that meant the boy probably had a very powerful quirk. Tsukachi asked who would accompany the boy. Eraserhead volunteered to go in case the boy tried to escape, and Hawks also insisted on going, seemingly to both annoy Eraserhead and to speak with Midoriya. The decision was made. Edgeshot and Best Jeanist left, and Tsukachi, Hawks, and Eraserhead returned to the room. Eraserhead took the boy to the quirk doctor and they waited for the results. Hawks kept pestering Eraserhead until Hawks finally spoke with the boy. The doctor returned looking surprised and explained that the boy appeared to possess a very powerful nature-based quirk and provided the standard assessment. Eraserhead shook his head and called him a problem child. Izuku felt unsure whether that was praise or criticism. Hawks complained that he was hungry and wanted chicken, leaning on Aizawa as they moved. Aizawa noted Hawks was always hungry and eating chicken, and told him to get off because he was heavy. 20 minutes later they arrived back at the police station. Izuku spent the trip quietly thinking of ways to train his quirk to its full extent. His constant mumbling had clearly unnerved Hawks, while Aizawa kept his usual impassive expression. Aizawa told Tsukachi about Izuku's quirk, and they agreed it would be too dangerous for him to live among civilians with a major villain on his trail. Aizawa sighed and volunteered to take Izuku in, muttering that he was not very well known. Izuku was surprised that Aizawa offered to adopt him. Aizawa signed the papers, and they went to retrieve Izuku's belongings from his house in the forest. Back at the house, Izuku and Eraserhead packed his things. Eraserhead examined a box of gadgets and asked what they were. Izuku explained that he had built them out of scrap parts when he was bored, modeling many on the devices heroes used and adding a few upgrades. Eraserhead suggested Power Loader would want to see them. Izuku asked if he should bring his notebooks. He explained they were well hidden and guarded by the creatures in the forest. Eraserhead hesitated and agreed the notebooks could be left behind if they were safely protected. Izuku packed his clothes, laptop, and a few other items. Aizawa carried the box of gadgets out to the car. Eraserhead commented that Present Mike was Aizawa's partner and that Hitoshi Shinso lived with them as an adopted son. Eraserhead grunted in response when Aizawa did not elaborate. Eraserhead then described, matter-of-factly, how hectic the household could be with a loud partner, an insomniac teen who loved cats, and 5 cats in the house. Aizawa did not deny it. On the drive, Eraserhead remarked on how Aizawa's hair behaved when he used his quirk. Izuku suggested a practical tweak. Instead of blinking, Aizawa could try winking to prevent dry eyes while still maintaining visual contact with an opponent. Aizawa considered the suggestion, thanked Izuku, and admitted he had never thought of that. They arrived at Aizawa's house. Aizawa unlocked the door and noted that the cats were not very interactive with strangers. Aizawa commented that the cats were not very interactive with strangers as he opened the door. Izuku thought that Aizawa had not listened to the quirk doctor, who had said animals were attracted to him. The house was pleasant, and Izuku noticed an enormous pile of coffee beans on the kitchen counter. He wondered how much coffee the household consumed. There were also a number of cat toys scattered about. Izuku asked Aizawa why 3 of the cats were named after food, noting the names Aizawa, Mike, Coffee, Espresso, and Oreo. Aizawa replied that he named them that because he could. Izuku mocked that answer with obvious sarcasm, and Aizawa said he could hear the sarcasm and called Izuku his problem child. Izuku protested that he was not that troublesome, but Aizawa reminded him that Izuku had been a vigilante for years, had lived alone in a forest since he was 9, and that a powerful villain was after him. Izuku insisted he was not a problem, only unique. They traded insults in the familiar way of a family finding its rhythm, and Aizawa led Izuku down the hall to a guest room and said he could put anything he wanted in it. Izuku accepted. Several hours later, Izuku had finished setting up his room with multiple plants and a bird feeder outside the window. He debated whether to use a nickname for Aizawa but left it undecided. He found Aizawa on the couch with Oreo in his lap and greeted him. Aizawa told Izuku not to call him that nickname and reiterated that Izuku should not call him problem child. Aizawa mentioned that Hizashi would be home soon. Izuku said he was going to take Mike and Coffee to his room and spent an hour there with the cats. Later, still holding Mike on his head and Coffee in his arms, Izuku went to the kitchen for a snack. Shinso spotted him and asked who he was. Izuku signed that he was Izuku Midoriya, using Japanese sign language, and explained that he knew Shinso's quirk and suspected Shinso might try to use it. Shinso asked whether Izuku was going to speak aloud, and Izuku said no, explaining that he already knew Shinso's ability. Shinso called out to Aizawa, asking who Izuku Midoriya was and why he was in their house. Aizawa emerged and explained that he had adopted Izuku as their new brother. Shinso asked whether their father knew, and Aizawa said he already had. Shinso asked why he had not been told sooner. Aizawa shrugged and said he was going back to sleep. Shinso listened as Izuku introduced himself more fully. Izuku explained that his quirk was nature's gift, that he had been living alone since he was 9 after his father disappeared and his mother was killed, that he had no other relatives, that he had been a vigilante, and that a very powerful villain was after him. Shinso observed that he could see why Aizawa called Izuku a problem child, and Izuku wondered aloud why Aizawa used that label. Shinso asked how Izuku knew his name and quirk. Izuku explained that his spider companions acted as spies and that part of his quirk allowed him to communicate with and attract animals. Shinso expressed surprise, then said he was going to do his homework. Izuku said he was going to train his quirk. 2 years later, Izuku was 15, and the household had settled into a chaotic routine. He would wake early to find Aizawa and Hizashi drinking coffee. Izuku did not need coffee himself because he could absorb energy from sunlight. Hizashi sometimes required a long routine to style his hair, and both men left early for work or school while Izuku stayed home to take online classes and occasionally college courses because simpler things bored him. Izuku continued to build gadgets from scrap and had met Nizu and some of the other teachers, who visited from time to time. Aunt Night came over most often and fussed over him in the way a doting aunt would. Izuku had been training all aspects of his quirk and had taught Aizawa Morse code as a private way to gossip and share information. With 10 months to go until the UA entrance exam, Aizawa and Hizashi planned to recommend both Izuku and Shinso to the school. Hizashi wanted to take the exam to test his skills as well, and Nizu approved. Izuku, however, preferred to earn his place by taking the test rather than entering by recommendation. He still visited his hideout in the forest occasionally to train and to check on the animals there. 10 months later the entrance exam arrived. Izuku wondered whether Bakugo would be there and whether he would remember him. Aizawa and Hizashi had left early to prepare, and Izuku expected Aizawa would need plenty of coffee to keep from falling asleep in odd places. It took about 15 to 20 minutes to walk to UA. The narrator enjoyed soaking up the sunlight along the way. Written exam. Hito-chan and the narrator were assigned to the same room for the written exam, and Auntie Night happened to be supervising. The entrance exam felt too easy. The narrator's packet was 15 pages because they had asked Nizu to make it more challenging. Everyone else's was 8 pages. They had 2 hours to complete the test, and the narrator finished in about 50 minutes. checking the work thoroughly before handing it to Auntie Knight, who wore a smug expression. The narrator told Auntie Knight they were going to the teacher's lounge to bring Aizawa his coffee. Auntie Knight asked, and the narrator explained that if they saw Vlad they should be told he owed her 500 yen. Auntie Knight said the staff had been betting on how long it would take the narrator to finish the exam. The narrator thought it ridiculous that anyone would expect them to take an hour, remembering past wins against Nizu in chess and Uno. Hito-chan agreed that Vlad could be a poor judge of time. The narrator announced they were going to deliver the coffee and urged the others to focus on the test before leaving. In the teacher's lounge they found Aizawa, who looked like a banana-yellow caterpillar in his own quiet way. The narrator told him they had brought coffee, and his eyes snapped open. Aizawa thanked the narrator, called them a problem child, and asked them to put the cup on his desk. The narrator said they were going to play chess with Nizu, which caused Aizawa to freeze up. The narrator remembered that the last time they and Nizu played chess, it had turned into planning something rather mischievous. At the physical exam, orientation was almost finished when a boy with blue hair and glasses interrupted Principal Papazashi. The boy pointed out that the pamphlet listed 4 robots but only 3 had been mentioned, and he criticized the narrator and Hito-chan for talking and causing a distraction. He suggested that if they were not going to take the exam seriously, they should leave. The narrator shot back that the boy needed to learn to read and that the 4th bot was an obstacle worth 0 points, and accused him of being the real distraction for interrupting with such a question. Hito-chan tried not to laugh. The blue-haired boy finally sat back down, and the narrator asked Papazashi to continue. Later, the narrator and Hito-chan were placed in different areas for the physicals, and the narrator found themselves in the same area as the blue-haired boy. The narrator noticed a girl with short brown hair who looked like she might panic, and moved to calm her down. The blue-haired boy put a hand on the narrator's shoulder and told them that the girl was trying to concentrate, that the orientation interruption was not funny, and that such behavior was unheroic. The narrator responded that the girl did seem close to a panic attack, that the blue-haired boy's interruption had not been funny, and that they were there to take the exam seriously. The narrator revealed playfully that they could be well-connected and implied knowledge of the boy's background, then warned him not to make an enemy of them. The narrator made it clear they could be kind, but that creating conflict with them would be unwise. The narrator walked away without looking back. People watching stepped aside as they passed. The narrator remained convinced they could be friendly, but reiterated that anyone who made them an enemy would come to regret it. He would gain a special eye form whenever a powerful urge to protect or help someone arose. At the USJ he earned the water form, a sudden and potent upgrade that turned his eye blue. Each additional form would add another color to his eye, and once he had collected them all he would be able to combine them into an overwhelmingly powerful state. The elemental forms were as follows: fire, red; water, blue; ice, sky blue; earth, green; dark, purple; light, yellow; metal, magenta; wind, cyan; electricity, orange-yellow; sound, yellow-green; chemical, neon green. Izuku felt pleased about having put Tensei 2.0 in his place and prepared for the practical exam. He planned to use the speed of a cheetah and the evasive agility of a housefly. He had studied how flies dodge attacks and intended to borrow that style of movement. His strategy for the exam was to use plants to restrain the training robots. Papazashi announced the start of the exercise over the intercom. Izuku sprinted through the gate at full speed while several others still stood dazed. He called out that there were no countdowns in a fight and surged into the mock city. He moved through the course, restraining robots with vines and plant tendrils. After roughly 10 minutes he had taken down dozens of robots and earned around 370 points, occasionally rescuing people from the simulated attacks. With points to spare and a few minutes left, he went to help civilians rather than chase more points. At that moment Nizu released the 0-pointer. Debris rained down, people screamed and ran, and chaos erupted across the simulation. Izuku had intended to avoid the commotion and continue the routine rescues, but he saw a girl trapped beneath a collapsed section. He wrapped the 0-pointer in a giant green cocoon of plants and then used vines to lift the debris and free her. It was a new application of his quirk that surprised even him. Papazashi called the test to an end shortly after. Jogging over, Izuku checked the girl's condition and used the healing aspect of his quirk to mend her twisted ankle. He informed her that she should be able to walk and then learned that she was Ochako Uraraka. Izuku identified himself as Izuku Yamada, also known as Midoriya, and said he needed to continue helping others before running off to assist Recovery Girl. Nizu had been watching from the control room. Earlier, while waiting for the practical exam to begin, he and Izuku had played a round of chess. Izuku remained the only person to have beat him, and he had done so again. They had shared a quiet conversation over tea, and Nizu found amusement in a bet between Vlad and Midnight about Izuku's performance. Half an hour before the practical exam began, the staff had parted to prepare, and the entire UA team watched the examinees from the control room. Nizu had arranged for Aizawa to place a microphone on Izuku's clothes without his noticing, intending some entertainment. What Izuku had said to Tenya Ida over that mic drew laughter from several staff members and even made Aizawa chuckle. Nizu considered Izuku an intelligent and kind young man, but he also noted that Izuku could be sharp if provoked. When Tenya had gotten on his bad side, the exchange had been lively. All Might, however, found the situation less amusing. He voiced concerns that Izuku's attitude might not be suitable for a hero and suggested that the distraction could interfere with others. Several staff members quickly pushed back on All Might's remarks, insisting that he had come to find a successor rather than offer unsolicited opinions. Nizu defended Izuku's capability to be a hero, praising both his intelligence and power, and reminded All Might that many staff members knew Izuku well. The conversation grew heated, with staff members arguing that Izuku had beaten a special test Nizu had designed in less than an hour, which settled Midnight's bet. Nizu made a note to send the recording of the exchange to Tensei so he could judge for himself. After the practical exam wound down, Izuku continued helping with recovery efforts. A few minutes later, the practical portion neared its conclusion. All Might and a few other staff who had not met Izuku before were shocked by the power he displayed in taking down the zero-pointer. From Izuku's point of view, it was the first day of school. Both he and Shinso had been placed in Class 1A. Class was going to start in 2 hours. Papazashi was somewhere annoying Auntie Knight. Aizawa was curled in his sleeping bag, and Hito was off doing something. Izuku was helping Nizu with paperwork, because he liked helping and Nizu did not mind. An hour and a half later, Izuku told Nizu that he had to go and would finish the papers later, and he asked if there was anything Nizu wanted him to deliver to the staff. Nizu handed him 3 folders, asked him to take them to Aizawa, Vlad, and Power Loader, and mentioned that All Might would be joining the staff tomorrow, giving Izuku permission to tease him. Nizu sipped tea as he spoke, and Izuku still did not understand where the tea came from. Izuku agreed and admitted that he still held a grudge against All Might after seeing the footage Auntie Knight had shown him of the control room incident. He wrapped himself in his father's scarf like a kitten to lure Aizawa out of his sleeping bag and then delivered the other 2 folders to Uncle Mage, known as Power Loader, and Uncle Ken, known as Vault King. Their father sighed at the shouting coming from the classroom. Aizawa stood up and announced that it had taken the class. 8 minutes to quiet down, introduced himself as Shota Aizawa, their homeroom teacher, and handed out gym uniforms for everyone to change into before meeting on the field. A staff member with glasses informed Aizawa that a student was absent and suggested expulsion if the student was not going to take UA seriously. Izuku jumped out of Aizawa's scarf and told the staff member that he was right there and that the man should mind his own business. Izuku then walked out of the room with Hito following behind him. Hito praised Izuku for his timing, and Izuku responded with a casual, non-committal reaction. 15 minutes later, still from Izuku's perspective, Aizawa, the teacher, told the class that it had taken them all 15 minutes to change and arrive, and that heroes did not have time for delays. He named Hitoshi Shinso and the student everyone called the problem child as the only 2 who had arrived in under 3 minutes. Momo Yaoyorozu raised her hand to ask who the problem child was. Izuku raised his hand to identify himself, which produced an audible gasp from the class. Shinso covered his ears and complained that their shouting would burst them. When a student asked whether they knew Aizawa, Izuku and Shinso replied that they were both adopted. Bakugo erupted, accusing Izuku of having lived with a worthless person and charged forward with his quirk activated. Aizawa restrained Bakugo with his capture cloth and warned that if he did not calm down he would be expelled. Bakugo clicked his tongue in irritation. Aizawa announced that the opening ceremony was pointless and that they would begin a quirk assessment instead, insisting that heroes did not have time for ceremonies. He warned them that being a hero was serious work. Natural disasters, villain attacks, and loss of life were not games, and declared that the student in last place would be expelled. The classroom fell silent. Aizawa asked Bakugo how far his ball had gone last year. Bakugo answered that it had traveled 67 meters. Aizawa instructed him to try again using his quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle, shouted, and threw the ball. The throw reached 267 meters, to the astonishment of many students. Aizawa then called Izuku forward. Izuku summoned a peregrine falcon, and the bird snatched the ball and dove at tremendous speed. The measurement registered as 1,609.34 meters. The class reacted with stunned excitement. Bakugo lashed out, accusing Izuku of suddenly having a quirk and insulting him. Izuku told Bakugo to be quiet, saying he did not want to deal with his behavior. Aizawa again warned Bakugo that continued disruption would lead to retention or expulsion. Ochako Uraraka used her gravity-altering quirk to make the ball float indefinitely, earning an infinite score. The pink-haired student's bold choice drew a reaction from others. Izuku found the comment unnecessary but shrugged it off. Aizawa then called Hitoshi Shinso, who arranged for another student to manipulate the ball in a creative way and also achieved an infinite result. Time skipped to the end of the assessment. Aizawa presented the results. First place went to Izuku Yamazawa, second to Hitoshi Yamazawa, third to Shoto Todoroki, fourth to Bakugo Katsuki, fifth to Momo Yaoyorozu, sixth to Tenya Ida, seventh to Fumikage Tokoyami, eighth to Mizo Shoji, ninth to Mashireo Ojiro, 10th to Ejiro Kirishima, 11th to Mina Ishido, 12th to Ochako Uraraka, 13th to Koji Koda, 14th to Rikido Sato, 15th to Tiu Ajui, 16th to Yuga Oyama, 17th to Hantasiro, 18th to Denki Kaminari, 19th to Kyoka Jiro, and 20th to Toru Hagakure. Izuku returned to the classroom after dealing with the explosive Pomeranian. Aizawa told everyone to do whatever they wanted, as long as they were not too loud, chaotic, or annoying, then crawled into his bright yellow sleeping bag. Izuku thought the sleeping bag made him look like an overgrown banana. He had urged Aizawa to get a new one, but Aizawa refused. Mina Ishido suggested they do introductions, asking everyone to say their name, explain their quirk, and say something about themselves. Mina said her quirk was acid and that she could create acid but had to be careful not to overuse it because it would reduce her resistance. She added that she liked to dance. After everyone else finished, Izuku introduced himself. He told the group that his quirk was nature's gift, which allowed him to influence aspects of nature such as plants, animals, wind, light, shadows, and earth, and even to perform a kind of photosynthesis. He explained that he had survived on his own from age 9 until he was adopted by Aizawa at 13. A classmate reacted angrily at first, accusing him of having said he was quirkless, and another asked incredulously if he had been quirkless. Izuku explained that his quirk had simply developed later than others. Momo Yaoyorozu, who had been listening, asked what he meant by living alone since age 9. Izuku confirmed her name and then explained. He said he had discovered his quirk at 9 during an attack by a sludge villain. He learned that a powerful villain had taken notice and seemed to want to steal his quirk or force him to join a villain group. In response, he used his quirk to build a fully furnished house and hid there for 4 years, keeping it as a hideout only a few trusted people knew about: Toshi, Aizawa, Papazashi, and Aunt Namuri. There was a moment of silence. Kaminari asked whether the top villain wanted a quirk to control elements. Izuku replied that his ability did more than that and offered a brief description of its other capabilities without going into one particularly sensitive detail. A classmate commented that his quirk sounded overwhelmingly powerful. When someone asked what had happened to Aunt Inko, Izuku answered quietly that she had died. He said that All for One had come to his home to try to take him. He had noticed something wrong, slipped out through a window, grabbed a few things, and fled. He still remembered his mother lying motionless while the villain sat there. He emphasized that he did not want to linger on it. Tears or grief would not change what had happened. He said he had support now from Aizawa, Toshi, Papazashi, and Aunt Namuri, and then announced he was going to check on Uncle Kan and Uncle Maji because the next class would not start for another 20 minutes. Ida admonished him for leaving without permission. Izuku said he had permission from Nizu for several years.